Okay. Barakallah fikum. Barakallah fikum. From what we went through with the definition at the beginning of the class on Urud al-Tijara, we defined urud, linguistically and technically. So for something to qualify as urud, ard, singular, urud, plural, it has to be something physical, observable, palpable, that we are trading in. So services are not, something physical that, we can exchange. So they do not qualify as urud. If somebody is engaged in an industry where he offers services, then what he is supposed to do is he offers the services in exchange for, money. So it is that money that will be, zakatable if it reaches the nisab, and all other conditions of paying zakat on money, apply to it. So what we played is money, zakat on money, not zakat on urud in that instance, because there's no ard to pay zakat on. Is that correct?
Thank you very much. So that means the money will have to wait for the normal howl of 1 year.
Naam.
And then, of course, reach the nisab and the normal rules will apply.
Naam.
Then the second thing is that on Urud al-Tijara, you mentioned, you gave an example of someone making coffee. And you said the machines, like the coffee making machine and things like that, that he uses are not, he's not to pay zakat on that.
No.
He's not to pay zakat on that.
But no. If he does not intend to sell the coffee,
which he does not intend to sell, yes.
No.
But you also mentioned that the Ra'sul Mal will be what to be valued in order to pay zakat on the Urud al-Tijara.
The Ra'sul Mal, that is the
Ra'sul Mal.
Now, that is the capital in the sense that, okay, you have Urud al-Tijara now.
Yes.
You have a store and you're selling things. So when you were to start, you had a capital with you. There was nothing in the store, so with that capital, you, let's say, bought the store, or you rented the store, you bought things into, in the store, your AC, your chairs, your tables that you're going to display the wares, on, and all that. So if there's anything left, so the Ra'sul Mal, the capital, has been divided into two things now: fixed assets that are not zakatable, the shop, the AC, all the things we mentioned that you are not selling, that are just there to aid your sales of things. Then you have a second part that is liquid cash. Then part of that liquid cash, you break it down. That liquid cash, you break it down to two. You buy what you are actually going to sell, and that will be zakatable with it, and you display those. Then you still have some of that Ra'sul Mal left with you. So that Ra'sul Mal, you split into three. That is what it means. A part that is not zakatable because you are not selling them, the shop and all the things that aid you in your sales. The second part are the things that you are actually going to sell. And the third part is any amount that is left over, if there's something left over. So the money flow, the cash flow will now be between what you sell and make profit on, and the money that you have, in the bank or stored, left out of the capital. So part of that capital will flow into buying the urud that you are selling. You sell part of the urud to generate, cash, and you put that in the back, and that cycle goes on like that. So once during that cycle, the money reaches the nisab, you mark that date and you start counting the howl. So when the howl is completed, you will assess your value, what you have, in the second category, which is the things that you're actually selling, and what you have in the third category, which is the money that you have in the bank. These two things are the things that you would put together in order to pay zakat on. So these are the two parts of the Ra's al-Mal that you pay zakat on. If you now want to dissolve the business, and sell the other parts that were previously not zakatable, then you've turned those parts into, the third part of Ra's al-Mal. You've turned them, you liquidated them, and turned them back to, you add them to what is in the bank, plus the wares that you're actually selling, the products that you're actually selling, you sell those ones off to, and you turn them back to money. So at the end of the day, what is left is money. If that coincides with the howl, then you pay zakat on everything. If it doesn't coincide with the howl, then you just wait until everything just turns to money that you have with you. And when the howl is completed, you pay zakat then. Then, because you had dissolved the business before the howl arrived, it won't be paying zakat on urud tijara, because there's no urud tijara that you're doing anymore. You've dissolved the business. It will be on money that you're paying zakat on. Is it clear?
Jazakumullah khair, it's very clear.
So let us start the class by asking, okay, in alhamdulillah, nahmaduhu wa nasta'inu wa nastaghfiruh, wa na'udhu billahi min shururi anfusina wa min sayyiati a'malina. Man yahdihillahu fahuwa al-muhtad, wa man yudlil fala hadiya lah. Wa ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. واشهد ان محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وعلى اله ومن تبعهم باحسان الى يوم الدين. Alhamdulillah, we have not ceased to be following the book Az-zakaat fi-l-Islaam, fi-Dh-Dhawi-l-Kitaab, was-Sunnah. Az-zakaat fi-l-Islaam, fi-Dh-Dhawi-l-Kitaab, was-Sunnah. The Sheikh Sa'id ibn Ali ibn Wahf ibn Muhammad Al-Qahtaani, who died on the Yaum al-ithain, 12th of Muharram, 1440. We have gotten to the part on zakat on al-ashum, shares in companies or businesses, and as-sanadat, bonds. So can someone, that's what we took last class, alhamdulillah. Can someone tell us what our discussion centered on with regards to shares? Somebody else will tell us what our discussion centered on with regards to sanadat. In summary, somebody. Malam Isa?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. What did our class center on with regards to shares? Malam Isa?
Yes.
Did you hear the question?
What's the question?
How can you hear that?
What did our class center on with regards to shares in companies last week?
Yeah, so there are two types of shares, or they can be viewed from two perspectives.
Okay.
So the first one is with regards to where the dealings are clearly halal, and then the second one is with the case where they also engage in some things where it could be not halal, it's in their own dealings.
Okay. Barakallah fiqh. Can somebody add to that, Mr. Jala? What did we discuss on shares last week?
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah. Please go ahead.
So one of the things was mentioned last week, the shares can be viewed from two perspectives. The first perspective is when the intention is to sell it, that is to have a kind of capital gain. So it is considered here as urud al-tijara. And the second perspective is if it is being held to gain dividends. So if it is to gain dividends, then it's only the dividend that will be taxed. I mean, sorry, that is going to be charged.
Az-zakaat. No.
I teach tax, so
No.
So that is going to be subjected to zakat.
No.
And if it is the other one whereby you have the intention of selling it to have an appreciation in the share price, in that case, both the share itself, the value of the share, and the dividend will be subjected to zakat.
Barakallah fiqh. Barakallah fiqh. Barakallah fiqh. Now, Madam Bashir, as-sanadat, what did we talk about on sanadat last week?
No, I wasn't in the class last week.
Okay, yes, that is true. That is true. Barakallah fiqh. Madam Mujib, sanadat.
Regarding sanadat, I think some from the little I understood, one would look at the finances that one has in the bank with respect to
what are sanadats, first of all.
I thought that was like financial institutions like banks and stuff.
Sanadat are bonds.
Oh, yes,
they
sorry.
are promissory notes that are given to lenders. Like the government wants money. So it tells people, lend me money and I will give you a promissory note in exchange for the money. In that promissory note, I will tell you that I'll give you back the money that you lend me, and I'll also add interest to it. And both the money and the interest will be delivered to you at a later date that is fixed. So this is sanadat. Shares, so sanadats are haram because it is a riba transaction. Sanadat are haram because it is a riba transaction. Barakallahu fikum. So in summary, shares are parts or portions of a business that is, a business is required to be set up. It has a certain, it requires a certain amount of money to do that. So at the beginning, we sell shares. It could be at the beginning that we sell shares. If it is at the beginning that we sell shares, then each of those shares will be a portion of the amount of money that we need to set up the business. Perhaps we need 1 million dirhams to set up the business. So we split it into 10 places. So that is 100,000 per share. 1% of we're splitting it 10 places. So that is 10% each. So 10% of that business is 100,000 dirhams. So we split it amongst 10 people who have shares in it. Or we split it amongst 5 people who have shares in it and put 200,000 down each. So these is what shares is all about. Then it could be that it's not at the beginning, but it's in the process that that we sell shares. Perhaps the business started out as a one-man business and needed to grow, and the money required to do that, in order to raise it, he said, okay, people come and have shares in my business and bring the money. I'll be dividing the business into this number of parts, and each share will cost you this amount. So if you buy shares in the company, then you are a co-owner in that business. Every decision that is carried out in that business, every transaction that is carried out in that business, you are also responsible for that. Every decision that is made, you are also responsible for it. You are also going to be the ultimate, beneficiary of profits or loss incurred by that business. If it makes profit, you will receive a share equal of that profit equal to the share that you have in the company. If the company makes a loss, you will receive a share of the loss equal to the share that you have in the company. If there's no gain and there's no loss, then there's nothing coming to you. So this is, how shares run, or how they are to run in, the Sharia. So sanadat on the other, so shares, if they follow this, description, then they are halal. But inshallah, today we'll go deeper into that. 2 is sanadat. Sanad means chain, and sanadat is plural of sanad. So sanadat is a promissory note that acts like a chain, binding you to the government or any other entity that you lend money to. So these financial instruments, a promissory note, a certificate, is issued by an entity, most times the government, asking people to give them money, to loan them money. That in exchange for that money, they will give you back that money plus interest after a period of time. So the government wants to engage in a project, and it doesn't have enough money to do that. So when that happens, oftentimes you have governments resorting to floating bonds, offering bonds for people to buy. So what you are buying is just a promissory note, and you are actually not buying anything. It is actually a riba transaction. You are lending money. So we said that this is haram, and we are not supposed to get involved in it. We're not supposed to get involved in it. So that's the summary of what we took last class. Alhamdulillah. So let's go to today's class today. We said, generally speaking, if we follow the description of shares that we just told us now and told us last week, that having shares is halal, provided that that company that we're having shares in does 2 things. It is engaged in what is halal, and its a procedure for doing the business is also halal. What you're selling is halal, and the way you are selling it is also halal. And procedure is not only the way you're selling it, but all activities surrounding it. Do you reinvest the money of the business in other businesses? If those other businesses that you're reinvesting it in are halal, then that is okay. If not, then that is haram. So let us go over here to the rulings on ashum. يجوز الفرع الأول حكم الأسهم الشركات. What is the ruling on shares of companies that companies sell? يجوز من حيث الأصل. by default, it is permissible to do what? Shira'u wa bay'u al-ashum sharikat, to buy and sell the shares of companies. Madama annaha la tumaris mu'amalat al-muharrama. So long as they fulfill those conditions that we talked about. They don't sell either products or services that are haram, and they don't engage in activities either in way of the way they sell or other related things that are haram. هذا اختيار ابن الإثيمين. This is the position of Sheikh Ibn Uthaymeen والقرضاوي وبه صدر قرار مجمع فقهية بالجدة. The conference or the fiqh conference in Jeddah, and also Lajna Da'ima also are of this position. So this is the position of the scholars. وذلك للآتي, and this is for the following reason. الأول أولا أن السهم حصة من شركات. The shares that you own is a portion, a fraction of the company. You own a fraction of the company. وقد أجمع أهل العلم على جواز عقد الشركات. And the scholars are of the opinion that it is permissible to form a company. نقل الإجماع على ذلك ابن قدامة. Imam Ibn Qudama, rahimahullah, a Hanbali scholar of old, he said that there's ijma of the scholars on this. You can form a company. Likewise, An-Nawawi. ثانيا عن الأصل, you can form a share-based company. People can come together, form a company, have shares in it. ثانيا, two, عن الأصل في العقود والشروط الإباحة. Second reason why it is permissible to have shares is that with regards to contracts, the default with regards to contracts is that it is permissible. The default with regards to business is that it is permissible because it is part of ada, it is part of muamala, it is part of things that are people do outside of the religion. So whatever you do in it is permissible by default, except we find something that you want to do that goes against the religion, like riba, for instance. So that is why sanadat is prohibited. Malam yaqum dalil ala tahrimi. Now, so long as we do not find evidence prohibiting it, then business is permitted. ثالثا, ليس في شركة المساهمة ما يتنافى مع مقتضى عقد الشركات، بل فيها تنظيم وتيسير ورفع للحرج. In forming a share-based company, we don't find anything. We said it's tijara in all its form. Tijara by default rather is permissible, except that we find something haram. So by default, we do not find in a share-based company anything that that goes against setting up this kind of company. We don't find it. Rather, we find that it makes things easy for people and leaves difficulty. There are many companies that will not be formed if we were to be set up as a one-man business. But when people come together, they share the risks and they share the resources, then it makes it easy for those companies to be formed. Fi-l-Thani, the second part. Like I said last week, I hope we are taking notes. It's always nice that we take the notes, and it'll help us to remember what we have taken in class, and we also discuss with the other people, teach them, so that it helps to pass the message across. But also, very importantly, it helps it helps what we have learned to stick. So the second point that we'll go through is لا يجوز شراء الأسهم الشركات التي أنشئت للمزاولة الأعمال المحرمة. It is not permissible to set up a company that to trade in the shares of a company that is set up to practice or perpetrate actions or deeds that are haram. مثل الشركات al-khumur. For instance, having shares in an alcohol or intoxicant-based companies. So in many places in the West now, they have they've legalized cannabis and things like this. A Muslim cannot have shares in such companies. They can't have shares in breweries. So it's not only alcohol, but anything that is khamr, anything that takes, that acts as an intoxicant that impairs the intellect. Wa tabul bunuk al-riba. Also, you can have shares in casinos, you can have shares in banks and things like this. وبهذا صدر قرار مجمع الفقهية الإسلامي. The Islamic fiqh conference also issued a report with, in respect to this, that it is haram to have shares in such companies. And the dalil for that in the Quran is Allah says, وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْبِرِّ وَالتَّقْوَى. Help each other and come together to in piety and fear of Allah. وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Do not associate, do not come together on sins and transgression against the laws of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, so shares are of two types. Shares are of two types. There are the shares that are halal. That is what Malam Isa was trying to point to in his answer. Shares, we said, generally speaking, it is permissible to have shares once they are halal, once they meet once they do not violate any of the provisions of the Sharia. Now, shares are of three types. There are the shares that are halal. There are the shares that are halal. That is clear. It is halal to invest in them. There are the shares that are haram. It is haram to invest in them. The example of shares that are halal are shares in schools, shares in grocery, company, in the fabric making countries, company, a cement company, a car trading company, things like this. Endless list of things that are halal. So it is halal to have shares in them once their activities, in addition to the products and services that we talked about, their activities are also halal. So those are halal companies. Having shares in them is halal. The second group are haram companies because they offer products that are haram. So even if their processes are halal, it does not, is of no benefit because what they are established on, the product or the service that they are established on, is haram. So having shares in an insurance company is haram. Having shares in a riba-based bank is haram. Having shares in a nightclub, is haram, and things like this. They are haram. So then the third category. The third category are those that mix aspects of both. They are called al-sharikatu al-mukhtalata. Ikhtilaf is for something to be mixing of something together. Khalata, to mix something together. Ikhtilaf, the action of mixing something together. Mukhtalaf, that which is mixed together. So what do they mix together, these companies? They engage in products or services that are halal, but their practices of trading in these things and their practices of managing the resources and relationships related to this company is haram. The product and service, halal. Their practices, one or more of their practices, haram. So they are called sharikatu mukhtalita. Sharikatu mukhtalita. Don't let us forget these three classifications of company. So it's like the hadith of Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says, al-halal bayyin wal-haram bayyin. That which is halal is clear, that which is haram is clear. Baynahuma umuru mushtabihat. Between them are issues that are, mixed. So this is one of them. So what is the ruling on al-ashum al-mukhtalata? Having shares in a company, in a sharika that is mukhtalata. La yujuz at-ta'amul bi ashum sharikat mukhtalata. It is not permissible to have shares in a company that is mixed. So we've explained what mixed means. Mixing halal with that which is haram. وهي أسهم الشركات التي تكون معاملتها في الأصل مباحة لكنها تتعامل بالحرام. So we explained it. The product or service is halal, but the way they go about doing business is haram according to the Sharia. في هذه الفوائد الربوية, it could be that they, as part of spreading their risks in their own estimation or growing their wealth, they put money in a fixed deposit or in some other, financial products that is riba based. So they collect riba and add that to the wealth of the company. So if they operate that way and you have shares in that, we had said at the beginning that you're a co-owner of the company and the people working in that company are carrying out, are working to your benefit. And the Sharia sees it that they are carrying out your directives. So if they are engaging in riba and you have shares in that, then they're working for you. So it is haram. أو الاستقراض بالفائدة, or they have money and they loan out. They act as lenders themselves. They lend this in exchange for riba. أو تبرم عقدا fasidan, or they engage in contractual in setting up contracts that are haram. So they have money, but they do. You have this company, and it engages in contracts. It signs contracts with other entities, and the basis of this contract is not permissible in the Sharia. What they want to do, then this is haram. For instance, some people might have money, some companies might have money and they say, okay, we will lend you money out of this money that we have with our company. We'll invest in your business in exchange for a fixed amount of the profits, but will not have anything to do with the loss or losses that you incur in. So this is not a share transaction. This is a loan transaction. And it is a riba-based loan because you're going to have a fixed amount that is coming to you, but you're not going to share in the loss. So you're just giving them money and collecting, fixed benefit from that. So if they engage in any act, any contract that is fasid, null and void in the eyes of the Sharia, then this is also one of the things that will make it a sharikatu mukhtalata. وبه صدر قرار مجمع الفقهية بالجدة. The Islamic Fiqh Council in Jeddah also issued a qarar. So in these fiqh councils that we talk about, we're mentioning, there are assemblies of scholars from different countries. So you have different, fiqh councils like that of the OIC, Islamic Organization of Islamic countries, and others like that, Muslim World League and things like that. You have scholars from different parts of the world coming together at conferences, usually held in places like Riyadh, Jeddah, and they, address issues concerning the Muslims, especially things that are that come up newly, mustajidat, things that are that Muslims encounter, newly and things like that. والمجمع الفقهية التابعة لرابطة العالم الإسلامي, and the World Muslim, Fiqh Council also issued this also, that it is haram to invest or have shares in a company that is mukhtalata. Yes, there are some scholars that have a different opinion, some contemporary scholars that have a different opinion. Inshallah, talk about their opinion and why that opinion does not hold water. Now, so the evidence for that again is Allah says, وَتَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ وَلَا تَعَاوَنُوا عَلَى الْإِثْمِ وَالْعُدْوَانِ. Do not help each other in committing sins and in transgressing against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, so this is from Islam Q&A, and it's asked a question: what is the ruling on buying and selling shares? Please note that some scholars regard shares from all companies as haram. That's the question. Let's go to the answer. Type of shares. Shares may be divided according to the field of activity and work involved into three categories. There are some scholars who divide shares this way. It is a bit cumbersome, and we encountered it when we're going through the book Az-zakaat fi-l-Islaam fi-Dh-Dhawi-l-Kitaab والسنة. So we use the easier one, which encompasses everything. So that classification is again popping up here. So this classification puts companies into four. So let's go through it. We'll see that at the end of the day, what it comes down to is your company offering products that are physical and can be sold? If it is offering what do you call it, products that are physical and can be sold and are being sold, then there's zakah on those things that you're selling, plus the money that you make from them and any other money that that business entity has anywhere. But the fixed assets of that company, like the offices, the tables and all that, the cars that the staff use and all that, they are not zakatable. So that is that. There's a minority view that says once it's a company, everything is zakatable. That is not so, because we have a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ that says that the horse and slave of a man are not zakatable. So the first type of these four companies is shares based on permissible work, such as companies that deal with transportation, shipping, manufacturing, office supplies, furniture, medical equipment, real estate, and so on, that do not engage in any haram practices or transactions, such as cheating, lending, borrowing on the basis of riba. Rather, they follow Islamic rulings in their transactions and dealings. These types of companies are permissible. So these are halal companies. The second, shares based on prohibited types of work, such as companies that deal in tourism. The tourism here are the tourism that are indiscriminate, where you bring in people to places that they're coming to do haram there. Like people that bring people to places like all these resorts where there's intermingling, they create avenues for people to be on the beaches and things like that, walk around with bikinis and things like that, then this is what they're talking about. But if your tourism is, you're taking people on Umrah, you're taking people on Hajj, you're taking people to visit Muslim countries and experience Islam and, things, there, you're taking people to, on business, tourism, to explore the business opportunities, halal business opportunities in different places than or schooling opportunities in different places, then this is not haram. So what they mean by tourism here is that which is haram. Likewise for hotels. If you run a hotel where and many people have shares in hotels in different places. And this is one of the things that it targets, tourists when they're coming into different countries where those hotels, are. So if those hotels are what people call dry hotels, where there's no alcohol being served, not that you get into the hotel, there are bars, even in the rooms, they have alcohols, alcohol or intoxicant on display, there and things like that. If you have none of that, there everything is halal, then this is not what they're talking about. They are talking about what is most common that you see in hotels, where they also allow people that are not married to, share rooms and things like that. But if your hotel is one where people come in, you look at their passports and marriage status to check them into, rooms, and there's no alcohol or anything, haram there, then that is permissible. Now, that promotes so that's why they put here hotels that promote and tourism, hotels that promote and aid immoral actions. Now, breweries, riba-based banks, commercial insurance companies, companies that print and distribute indecent magazines, and so on. So all of these, are haram. So we have halal companies, we have haram companies. The third are companies whose field of work is basically permissible, but they engage in haram practices and transactions. So the three that we talked about. So the types of companies these types of companies are called mixed, that is mukhtalata companies. So this is the three that we treated in the previous page. I thought it was a different one now. So it's the same, thing that you're saying. Over here is a fatwa from Lajna Daima. The basic principle is that it is permissible to hold shares in any company if it does not deal with haram things, such as riba and so on. But if it does deal with haram things, such as riba, then it is not permissible to hold shares in it. Based on that, if any of the shares mentioned are in a company that deals with riba or haram things, then it is essential to withdraw from it and get rid of any profit by giving it to the poor and needy. So these are the shuyukh that in Lajna Daima that issued that fatwa. So I'll ask a question. We have said, the scholars have said, that trading in haram companies is haram. Having shares in haram companies is haram. Buying and trading sanadats, bonds, is haram. Having shares in companies that mukhtalaqa is also haram. So somebody, a Muslim who is serious about his deen, now learns about this. What is he to do? This is a question. He has shares in a brewery, and it is haram for him to trade in the shares. So the first question I want to ask is, what are the options available for him to stop his engagement in this brewery company? And which one of those options is the correct one to choose? Somebody has shares in a brewery. He now knows he must disengage. What are the options available to him? Let's start with that. Malam Mujib. Malam Bashir.
Yes. The option available is I think the best option available is to disengage and take whatever he had invested in the beginning, and the profit should be shared to the needies.
Okay, that's one option. So he has the share certificate with him. Okay. What is he going to do with that share certificate? in order to, to be able to get his money and spend the profit, get the initial money that he spent and keep that, and the profit on it he shares to the fuqara. How is he going to arrive at that? What he has right now is the share certificate. What is he going to do with that share certificate in order to get to what you said? Madam Zahar.
Assalamu
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
I didn't quite get the question.
Somebody invested in a brewery when he didn't know that it was haram. Now he knows that it is haram, and he also knows that he must disengage. He has a share certificate with him. Malam Bashir says what he's supposed to do is to take out the original money that he invested, and any profit that that share had gathered must be given as sadaqah to the fuqara and masakin, or in any act of khair. So what he has right now with him is the share certificate. How is he going to use that share certificate to arrive at getting his money and giving the excess in sadaqah? What are the options available to him?
He needs to sell the shares.
That is one option. But remember, trading, buying or selling shares in haram companies is haram. So comment on that.
Well, okay. He may sell it to a non-Muslim.
It's still selling, right?
Yeah, but if he sells it to a non-Muslim, he's going to get maybe the capital that must have appreciated, and it takes out he's going to take out the original amount he invested, and then the balance can be shared.
I agree with you.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to calm down on is the act of selling. Why will it be permissible for him to sell when selling and buying shares in haram companies is haram?
I mean, that's the only way you can accept it. Even if he has to give it to somebody, he's also giving somebody something that is haram. So that's the only way. It's almost like a darura. Right? That's what I think.
Barakallahu fiqh. It is the lesser or the least of the options that he has. One option he has is to just abandon the shares with the company. That means both his original capital, which we assume is halal, the money that he used to buy the shares in the first place, wasn't stolen, wasn't money, that was riba, and all that. So he will leave that halal money with people that are engaged in haram to do business with. So that option is one option, but it's not the best. The second option is to sell his shares back to the company that he bought it from. But practically, that will most likely not happen. They won't buy the shares. They have sold the shares, but you can trade the shares to other people. It's only once in a while that you have companies wanting to buy back their shares from people. And that usually happens maybe when a company was originally a one-man business and the owner is fearing that he is losing a grip on the company and wants to buy back, shares from people and all that. But ordinarily, they won't want to, buy back the shares from you. If they buy it back, that is the best option. If they buy it back from you, that is the best option because you are getting back your money you're also withdrawing from them the profit associated with it. So they have just the share with them now. They have less money and they just have, paper share with them. Yes, they can sell to somebody else, but that is now no longer your own business. And they may not get somebody, which will be good. It will reduce the, the strength, the worth of their business. That is the best if you can do it. If that is not possible, then the next best is, first of all, in that first instance, you are selling to them, because selling to them is better than gifting it to them. If you gift it to them that I'm not doing again, they still have money, your money to do business with, that is haram. So you want to remove that from them. So that's why that option is not the best. Gifting them is not the best. So sell your shares to them is better than that, and collect your money. But they may say they don't want that. So you look for somebody like them that is other than them. Another person that is interested in haram like them, that will buy the shares. Maybe a non-Muslim. And you say, oh, I want to sell these shares. So you remove the money from the company that is engaged in the haram, as you will have done if you sold it to them, and somebody else buys it. So of course, when that person buys it, he puts the money back into their business. But you are not the one that did that. So the best option is if they will take the shares back from you, you sell it to them. You don't involve a third party. The next best is if they don't take it from you, you look for a third party that is not Muslim that will buy it from you, and you disengage. That which is halal for you is the amount you bought the shares in the beginning. The amount that you bought the shares in the beginning is what is yours. You may have bought it when it was 5 dirhams, and it is now 500 dirhams per share. That excess of 495 dirhams is haram for you. So you take it and you spend it in any act of birr, of charity, that you are not obligated to do, and you will not receive a benefit from. So you cannot use it to pay your zakah. You cannot use it to send your child to school or anything like that. That is an obligation for you to do. It is money that is haram for you. So you cannot use it for that. But you can donate it to the fuqara, the masakin, building mosques, hospitals, or anything like that that the Muslims will benefit from. So is it clear? Is it clear? Are we following the class?
Yes.
Okay, alhamdulillah. So, so that is that. So when we talked about, the statement of the Organization of Islamic Conference on shares, this is, the statement. We talked about that on from Lajna Da'ima. So the statement from the Organization of Islamic Conference, it was referred to in the previous one, the previous article that we read. So let's read the exact statement here. It says, that was in 1412, 1992. Says, as the basic principle concerning transaction is that they are permissible. Founding a share-based company that has Islamically acceptable aims and activities is something that is permissible. 2, there is no difference of opinion concerning the prohibition of holding shares in companies whose basic aims are haram, such as dealing in riba or producing or trading in haram things. So once something is haram, the scholars are united on that. So the first type, halal companies, is halal to have shares in them if their practices are halal. Haram companies, it is haram to have shares in them, whether or not their practices are halal or haram. 3, the basic principle is that it is haram to hold shares in companies that sometimes deal in haram things, such as riba and so on. This is mixed. These are mixed companies, also haram. So the only type of company that is permissible to have shares in are companies that are halal and engage in halal activities. So you also have a statement from the Islamic Field Council of the Muslim World League. So said, that's in 1985. Said, as the basic principle concerning transactions is that they are permissible, founding a share-based company that has Islamically acceptable aims and activities is something that is permissible. There is no difference of opinion about the same thing. It is not permissible for a Muslim to buy shares in companies or banks if some of their transactions involve dealing in riba or manufacturing or trading in haram things. And 4, if an individual purchases shares not knowing that the company deals in riba, then he finds out about that, what he must do is get out of it. And we just talked about the options, the 3 options available to him, and the hierarchy of choosing those options. So let's say we said the best is to sell to the company. If the company doesn't get it back to the shares, doesn't accept the shares back from him, he should look for a third party. Let's say a situation where he does not find a third party to do that. That will be very difficult, really, anyway. But let's say there's a situation where he doesn't find anybody that will buy the the shares from him. Then in that case, what he should do is the money that he gets, just keep giving it out in sadaqah from there. The money that he gets from there, keep giving it out in sadaqah from there, because that will still be better than abandoning the thing, both the money and all that, and there's no good that will come out of it. But in that case, the worst option is one that at least some good comes out of it. So the dividends that they give, he does what? He gives that to the fuqara, and he has none of it. The prohibition in this case is clear because of the general meaning of the evidence. So we're taking this one. Let's so now let's go to the 3rd article. The ruling on short-term mudaraba. Now, I mentioned that there are a few contemporary scholars who say that it is permissible to deal in mixed companies, shirkat al-mukhtalata, companies that their primary product or service that they offer is halal, but they engage in practices that are haram. The scholars, different Islamic bodies and conferences or world bodies have said that it is haram. We have some individual scholars who say otherwise. Of course, from what we just said, that should suffice that their position is not to be followed. But just to mention it and expose the weakness in their position. Now, so they call this. They say that if mudaraba is, if I'm not interested in forming a company with you, you are not interested in forming a company with me, but there's a project. So daraba means to hit something, to strike something. So let's come together and deal with this project, strike it, execute it. So mudaraba, tafa'ala, means mutual activity regarding something. So mudaraba is to jointly attack the project. So the person comes and says, I have the expertise and everything, I don't have the money. You have the money. So bring your money, let me bring my manpower, and let us attack this project. It will last for 6 months or 1 year, and we dissolve the thing. We get the profit. This is what will come to you. This is what will come to me. So this is called mudaraba. But if we set, if it's going to be a company and all that, that would be musharaka. You're setting up to be, permanent owners of the business. So some of these scholars, or the scholars who hold this opinion, they say that if you are involved if you buy shares in a company for a fixed period of, short period of time, then this will be regarded as mudaraba. There are two things wrong with it. You are investing in a company. It is a fixed company. It's not a project. So it is not mudaraba, it is musharaka. But even if it was mudaraba, the reason why it is made halal or haram, or specifically haram now, is not because it is a company or it is a project. The reason why it was made haram is because their practices are haram. That practice is haram, whether it is a company, a project, or a single man doing the business. An individual running a one-man business, the product or service he is offering is, halal, but he engages, his practices concerning that business is haram. It is still haram. So whether it's an individual, a group, a project, or a company, it's the reason why it's made haram is not because of the description of the entity, but rather the description of the practice and the product and service. So they say, firstly, there's also an Islam Q&A article. It says it's not permissible to buy shares in companies that deal in haram things, such as riba, etc., whether the haram is small or great, because a share is a part of the company's wealth, and its dealing is in haram means that everyone who invests in it is a partner in that haram. Secondly, it is not permissible to trade in mixed and haram companies' shares by buying, selling, or investing, whether that is short-term or long-term, because it is not permissible to sell haram things, whether in small or large quantities or amounts. A contract that involves that is a contract that is not permitted to enter into. Now, one of the shiur says some people differentiate between mudaraba, buying and selling, and short-term projects and long-term investment, and say that the one who engages in mudaraba, short-term projects, does not have to worry if he buys a share in a company that gives or takes riba-based loans. My response is to ask these people, what Sharia justification do you have for the profit that you make on the shares when they go up? He will never have any answer but to say, I have a right to those shares because I'm a partner in that company. Similarly, I say to him, what if the company were to make a loss a few minutes after you bought the shares? Can you deny your connection to the company so that you will not have to bear any loss? Of course, he will not be able to do that, and he will bear the same loss. So what is trying to say, as you benefit, you are benefiting from the profits, and you are being affected by the loss because the company is acting as your representative. So it says not only that if the company were to merge with another company, or it were to be sold to another company, or it went bankrupt, or was no longer on the stock market, or its license was taken away, all of that will have an effect on the mudarib, the one who is buying shares just for a limited period of time. And it will also have the same effect on the one who is buying the shares for a long period of time. So there's no difference between the one who is buying the shares for a short period of time or the one who is buying it for a long period of time. It's the same. He was also asked ruling on short-term projects in mixed shares, mixed companies that mix halal and haram. Says it's not permissible according to the majority of scholars, except in the case of pure shares, that is halal shares. Halal shares companies, halal. Haram shares companies, haram. mixed companies, haram. Now, those scholars that say, those few scholars, that say that you can engage, you can buy shares in mixed companies for a short period of time, and there's nothing wrong with that. They put conditions to it. Now, these conditions, when you look at it, it's not possible to fulfill. And what do they say? They say you should clean the profits that comes to it. If it will be possible, it will be very, very difficult to fulfill. So they say if you have shares in such companies, that when you get dividends from them, that you should calculate the amount of dividend that was a result of the haram practices that they engaged in, and then deduct that from your dividends and do sadaqah with it. You'll have to be, an accountant that has access to the company's records to do that. And each time they give you, dividends, you have to, go to get that done. How many people who have shares are in this, situation where they are accountants, or I employ accountants to do it, and the company will give them access to their financial their full financial statements beyond the annual reports. The annual reports will just say that's what shareholders have access to. It's auditors that will have access to the real meat of the financial transactions. And, all others will not have access to that, except the people that are working within that company. So how do you want to achieve that? Now, so the question goes, this is Islam Web article. Islam Web is a website of the Al-Qaf, Ministry of Islamic Affairs of Qatar. هل أي قيمة من قيم الأسهم يدخلها تطهير؟ وإذا قلنا إن المضارب يلزمه تطهير، فهل يكون تطهير في قيمة سوقية للأسهم؟ جزاكم الله خير. Said, is there any part of one's shares that is amenable to being cleaned? That is, we have shares in a mixed company. There's nothing to clean in a haram company. It is haram. There's nothing to clean in a halal company. In the shares that you have in a halal company, it is halal. So it is in mixed company that this applies to. So if we say, the questioner says, if we say that there is an opportunity for cleaning one's shares, then how do you clean it? When you are judging what would be halal for you to keep, your own capital, is it the amount that you bought the shares, and anything excess of that will go for sadaqah, or the current market share of the shares, and anything above that will go for sadaqah. So they said, Alhamdulillah, wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulullah, ala Rasulullah wa alihi wa ala alihi wa ashabihi amma ba'd. Said, فقد فصلنا القول في الضوابط الشرعية لجواز الامتلاك أي السهم، سواء كان في البنك أو الشركة أو غيرها، وذلك في فتاوى هذا. Said, we have already explained in details the conditions for owning shares in any entity, whether it is in a bank, which is haram, or in a company, and there are different types. We've talked about that. There are 3 types. Now, وعلى كل فإنه ليست كل الأسهم تحتاج إلى التطهير لدى من يقول به. Says that all that notwithstanding, it is not all shares that are amenable to cleaning with respect to those who hold the opinion, the minority of contemporary scholars who hold the opinion that you can clean, your the shares that you have in a mixed company. The majority of scholars, the vast majority of scholars say there's no cleaning or anything. So cleaning is that out of the profit that you make, that that you get as dividends, and also appreciation upon the costs that you paid, or the amount that you paid to buy the shares, you want to look for a fraction that you can still keep, that you won't give out as sadaqah. So you want to calculate with the percentage of haram that they did, how that haram contributed towards the profits, and the part that wasn't haram of the activities. Keep the part that was halal, and that was halal, and leave the part that is haram. So it says, بعض الشركات والمؤسسات أسهمها محرمة أصلا ونشاطا. Says for some companies, both their products and services, and likewise their activities, are haram by default. لا يفيد فيها تطهير. There's no cleaning that can be done for these ones. كالبنوك الربوية, like riba-based banks. فهذه لا يجوز شراء أسهمها ومن so for these, this is not permissible to buy their shares. ومن اشتراها جاهلا أو عالما بحرمتها وباعها بربح فليس له سوى أصل ماله. Whoever buys the shares in this type of haram companies, either unknowingly or knowingly, that it is haram, yet he buys it and he sells it afterwards. He sells the shares, i.e., he didn't know initially that a Muslim is not supposed to have shares in a bank, so he went ahead to buy it. Or he knew that a Muslim is not supposed to have shares in bank. Despite that, he went ahead to buy it. Then the one who didn't know, he now knows. He read from the scholars or heard from the scholars, so he chose the list of the evils in disposing of it, and he now sells. Or the one that knew, he wants to sell to make a profit, despite the Sharia, whatever. Both of them should know that the only thing that is halal for them is what they invested ab initio. The capital that they invested ab initio to buy the shares. If when they bought it 10 years ago, it was 2 dirhams per share and is now 200 dirhams per share, what is theirs is 2 dirhams per share. The remaining 198 dirhams per share is to go for sadaqah. فحسب and that is it. وربح كله محرم يتخلص منه. Every single thing above that is haram for him, and he should free himself from it by giving out a sadaqah. ومن الأسهم ما هو حلال. So we talked about that which is haram. But there are ashum, shares that are halal. ولا تحتاج إلى تطهير. And there's no need to clean that which is already clean. وإنما يدخل التطهير في أسهم مؤسسات التي دخل الحرام في نشاطها أو معاملاتها بنسبة معينة لدى القائلين بجواز امتلاك أسهم تلك المؤسسات. So the only group of companies that if one has shares in them, some say that you can claim their shares, are shares that deal in a product that is ordinarily halal, but they have activities that are haram. So the people who say that you can have shares in these type of mixed companies are the ones that are saying that you can claim these shares. So you can't claim haram share, 100% haram shares. You are not to claim 100%, halal shares. So these people that are saying that shares are claimable, they are talking about cleaning shares of mixed companies. قال الشيخ القرضاوي, one of the scholars that hold this, an Iraqi scholar, he says التخلص من نسبة الحرام وشبهات في كل ربح حصل له سواء كان ربحا تشغيليا. The way to free oneself, the way to clean such shares, whether it is money that is gotten, from operation of the company, that would be dividends. ربحا ناتجا عن بيع والشراء, or profit that is gotten from buying or selling in such companies. والمضاربات وذلك لأن الأسهم كما قلنا يمثل حصة شائعة من وجودات الشركة. We have previously said that shares are a portion of the total assets of the company. وأن هذا الجزء محرم إن كان ناتجا عن فائدة. And that we also said that this fraction is haram if it is from profit, from interest. وهذا واضح في وجوب التخلص منه. So therefore it is it is essential to abandon that. وإن كان الناتج من بيع والشراء فيجب التخلص بقدر ذلك لأن الناتج عن هذا جزء المحرم أو أنه يقابله. وبناء عليه فتطهير وإخراج نسبة محرم. Let's just skip to this one. وبناء عليه, therefore based on that, فتطهير وهو إخراج نسبة محرمة. Cleaning the shares is the removal of the part of the profit that you get or the dividends that you get that is haram. إنما يكون من ربح فإن أخذ ربحا فإن أخذ ربحا فليخرج نسبة الحرام منه. If he gets the profit, then he is to remove that portion that is haram from it. ويسر فيها في مصالح المسلمين, and he should use it in things that will benefit the Muslims. أو يدفعها للفقراء والمساكين, or he should give it to the poor and the needy. وننبه السائل الكريم إلى أن تطهير المذكور ليس هو الزكاة. We are drawing the attention of the questioner that this cleaning is not to be counted as your zakah al-wajiba fil mal, bal tadhir at-takhallus min mal al-haram. So the one who spends this money should not take it as is paying zakah. Rather, is a way of getting out of haram that you're involved in. Wala yakfi an ikhraj zakah. It's not to be counted as money that you pay as zakah. So that is on that. So the same thing here. Someone who had shares in a company that's engages in riba. So just read to him what we read earlier of the Islamic Fiqh Council that was issued in 1995. Let's see the last article. Okay, this is also beneficial, inshallah, and is the last one that we'll take up on it. The question goes, I hope that you can give me some details on the ruling on zakah on company shares. Is zakah due on them or not? Okay, this is what I was referring to about breaking companies down into 4. I thought the previous article on Islam Q&A was mentioning that, it was actually this article. So where I said that the easier way to look at it is, are you selling the shares or are you not selling the shares? If you're selling the shares, then the shares is furud tijara, and you have to pay zakah on it. In addition to that, you have to pay zakah on the dividends. But if you are not selling the shares, then there's no zakah on the shares, according to the vast majority of the scholars. but you pay zakah on the dividends. Likewise, the company itself, if what is offering is services, then there is no zakah on the services. If what is offering is products, then there is zakah on the product, because products are urud at-tijara. So they will pay zakah on the products. Whether they are product companies or service companies, if they have money, then they pay zakah on money, as we have taken, before, which will be 2.5%. Once the conditions for paying zakah, have been met. 1 year has passed after reaching the nisab and all that. Before I forget, before we read this, there's a question, that, I wanted to ask last class, and that is this. If you, or I wanted to, is associated with what we treated last class. This is a continuation of it. And this is it. If I am buying shares in a company that we are setting up today, when am I going to pay zakah on it? We are starting the company today, and let's say the money that we have invested reached the nisab today. It was even above the nisab today. So when am I going to pay zakah on it? Anybody?
After 1 year, when the full business year is completed.
Barakallahu fiqh. That answer is correct in one setting. That answer is correct in one setting. What is a setting when it won't be correct? Inshallah, we'll talk about it shortly. The second is, what if the company had already been existing and it has been existing for some years, and today, and their assets from day one had been above the nisab. So, but me today, I buy shares in that company. When am I going to pay the zakat on that share that I bought today?
I believe it's same thing apply after a while. How the 1 year full business year is completed for me.
After 1 year, if my these are the situations. One, it will be after 1 year, one lunar calendar. If the shares that I bought, I intend to trade it, and the value of that share plus the dividend reaches the nisab. So it will be 1 year, not from the date I bought it. In one scenario, it will be 1 year, not from the date I bought it, but from the date when it reaches the nisab. I start counting a howl. So this is different. The company was set up a couple of years ago. They had reached the nisab right from day one. For me, after years, I am now, buying the nisab. I'm now buying shares in that company. So I will look at what I bought in the shares. In one scenario, I'll look at my intention for buying the shares, and I'll look at what I bought in the shares, the value of what I bought in the shares. If my intention is to buy the shares so that I'll trade in the shares, after a while I'll sell it, then that share is urud tijara, and zakah on it may be subject to the zakah on urud tijara, or it will be subject to the zakah on urud tijara if all other conditions for paying zakah apply to it. I.e., once it reaches the nisab, once the value reaches the nisab, and that value may reach the nisab if I bought enough quantity of it on that first day, or it may not. It may be that I collect, dividends, I don't spend the dividends, and I continue, store it. Then when the value of the dividend plus the value of the shares equals the nisab, I start counting one howl from that. Then once the howl completes, in this same first scenario you're talking about, then I pay zakah on it. Is it understood? Is it understood? Everybody else, is it understood? Everybody else, is it understood?
For me, I think there's a mix-up in the situations.
Okay.
So are we talking about the situation we just talked about is when we buy the shares,
Okay.
whether from the beginning or when the company had already been set up?
Yes, we are talking of two scenarios now. So we are asking, in each of those scenarios, when do you pay zakah? So I said the first scenario, let's say we are forming the company together, or a couple of people form a company together, all of them Muslims, all of them have the requirements of paying zakah and everything like that. On that first day, the company's value, the value of their shares, of each of their shares, this person's share is up to the nisab or above the nisab. When does each of them begin to, when will each of them pay the zakah on the shares? Madam Tawfiq said 1 year after that. Do you agree with him? Madam Zaid?
Yes.
Okay, so I said that is correct in one scenario. There is a scenario where it won't be correct. We'll talk about it shortly. So while we are waiting to talk about that, let's talk about another, instance where we bought the shares later after the company had been formed. In this second instance, if we bought the shares after the company has been formed, we look at two things. What is the intention for selling the shares? Also, even this one of intention, we look at it in forming the company itself, right from day one. So it also applies in that one also. So in this second instance, we look at what is the intention? Am I buying the shares to sell, or am I buying it as an asset? If I'm buying to sell, then it is a trade good that is zakatable. Then I look at the worth of that trade good, that share. If it is up to the nisab, then I begin to count the howl. 1 year after, if it is up to the nisab on the day I bought it, I begin to count the howl. 1 year afterwards, I pay zakah on it. If it is not up to the nisab, then I wait for two things to happen: the share value to appreciate and the dividends to accumulate if I don't spend them. Then, once the combination of that causes the share and the dividend value to reach the nisab or exceed it, then I begin to count the howl. 1 year after that, I pay zakah on it. Is it clear?
Yes.
Okay. So these two things, things are correct in one scenario. And what is that scenario? Sheikh Al-Ithain, I think in this article that we're about to read, brought our attention to it, is that it is a scenario where the money that you use to buy these shares, you either got it that same day, or the money that you used to get it did not reach the nisab. Because we had said that trade goods are what? Are just like a representation of money. That if people could put money under their pillows and it will grow, people will not engage in business. So they buy trade goods in order to get money. So they spend money to buy trade goods in order to get money back. And that cycle goes on and on and on like that. So what everybody really wants is money. So if you have money that is less than the nisab, and you buy shares that will of course be less than the nisab, then you will wait until that the worth of that share or those shares and the dividends attached to them will equal the nisab. But in another scenario, if the money you had was at or above the nisab and you bought shares that are at or above the nisab, whether you are starting the company from the beginning or you are buying those shares midway, your howl does not start counting on the day you bought the shares. Rather, it starts counting on the day the money that you used in buying the shares attained the nisab prior to you buying the shares. So for instance, in Muharram, you had money that was up to the nisab. In Rajab, you decided to buy shares in a company, and the total number of shares that you bought was, up to the nisab. Do you start counting your haul from Rajab or from Muharram? You start counting your haul from Muharram, because there's no difference in the money and the form that you now converted it to in Rajab, which is the shares. It is still counted the same in the eyes of the Sharia. It's counted as the same in the eyes of the Sharia. Do we understand?
Yes, yes.
The same thing applies if you bought with your money that you had in Muharram, you bought gold with it in Safar. And in Rajab, you sold the gold and bought, shares. It is still the same thing. The share value will be what month will you start counting your haul to pay the money on your shares? Is it Muharram? Is it Safar? Or is it, Rajab?
Muharram.
Muharram. You had money that reached the nisab cash in Muharram. In Safar, you bought gold with it. In Rajab, you sold the gold to buy shares. It's still the same thing. It's still the same thing. If you sold the shares and you got money back, you are still going to pay your zakat when? On the last day of Dhul-Hijjah. That is when the haul will end. If your money reached the nisab, the initial cash reached the nisab on the 1st of Muharram. So you're changing it to gold, it's still money. You're changing it to shares, it's still money. You're changing it back, selling the shares and getting money, it's still money. So is it clear to everybody now? Okay, so it's a point I wanted to get across to us. So let's go to that articles. Shares refers to a partnership in a portion of the capital of a joint stock company. The word is used to refer to the document which proves that you own the shares, as well as the shares itself. So let's skip that. The value of shares, there are different value of shares. Let's skip that. We have that with us. Whether it's a true value, nominal value, market value, and all that. Shares can be traded among individuals like other products, which makes people take them as a means of trade by buying and selling them with the aim of making profits? In the answer to question this, we have stated that there is nothing wrong with selling shares or selling company shares so long as the company's activities are not haram. How should zakat be paid on company shares? Some shareholders buy shares to trade them with the aim of making profits. Or let's skip this. We have talked about it. If you are buying the shares in order to sell, that is a trade good, you're going to pay zakat on it along with the dividend. If you just want to, get the dividend alone, then there's no zakat on the share itself, just the dividends. Now, there are the four categories that some scholars break these companies to. The first one will be companies that trade in services, basically. Service-based companies. So for these companies, they say these are regarded as trade goods regardless of the company's activities. They say because, some scholars are of the opinion that once you have a company, you are going to pay zakat on its assets because it's a company, whatever the case may be. This, let me see. Some shareholders buy shares to trade them with the aim of making a profit, and some buy them and keep them so that they may have income from their profits without trading in them. In the former case, when you intend to trade in them, the shares are regarded as trade goods for buying and selling on the stock exchange. So they come under the same ruling as trade goods, as zakat must be paid on them. That is clear. In the later case, when you don't intend to sell the shares themselves, the contemporary scholars and researchers differed concerning those shares. But there are two main points. One say that you are still going to pay shares on those shares. You're still going to pay zakat on those shares, even though you don't intend to sell them because they are part of the company. This is the outweighed view. They are urud al-qimya. They are not urud al-tijara. Those who say that, they should be regarded. They say they should be regarded as trade goods, even though you don't intend to sell them, regardless of the company's activities. They say because their owner makes a profit from them, like any other trader makes a profit from his goods. So in this sense, they are like trade goods. But this is not correct, because every urud al-qimya that you have is also liable to increasing in value or decreasing in value. Your private house, we all agree that you're not going to pay zakat on. It increases in value over time, and it can also increase in value. So different assets that you have that are not to be sold, they decrease in or increase in value. They are subject to that. The same thing with shares that you don't intend to sell. So that is why this position is the outweighed. And the position that is correct, Allahu A'lam, is that if you are keeping the shares, not intending to sell them, there's no zakah on them. So it's nice to know these opposing opinions and their weaknesses or strength, so that when one is discussing them or applying them to oneself, one will know what to do. The second, ruling on shares differ according to the type of company that issued them. This is what's the four things that we're talking about. The first are service companies. If you're offering services, there's no zakat to pay on your services. But the money generated, that was a question that Madam Zayad asked at the beginning of the class. But the money generated by the company, you pay zakat, not because it is urud al-tijara, but because it is money. So you pay zakat on money, 2.5%, once it reaches the nisab and 1 year passes over it. So, so for manufacturing and service companies, ignore this manufacturing, because what they're talking about at the end of the day is just service companies that do not engage in any type of trade, like the dye companies, hotel companies, transportation companies. No zakat is due on the shares of these companies, because the value of these shares is based on equipment, tools, buildings, furnitures, and so on, which are needed in order to do the work, and there is no zakat on these things. So if you are doing any type of business, whatever name you call it, but the assets of the business, you are not selling them, but you are using those assets to generate service, then this is what? This is a service company. That is the correct name to give to it. They are not manufacturing companies. So for these, there's no zakat to pay on them. Another type of company. So now, so if you have shares in this, they are service companies. But your share in them has a different ruling depending on your intention. So if there's a service company, that company in and of itself will not pay zakah except on its except on the money that it has acquired. But you that you have shares in it, in that company, you ask yourself, are you getting the shares as urud al-qimya or urud al-tijara? If you're selling the shares, then you will pay zakah on it because it's a trade good, along with the dividends. Now, second company, they engage in trade. Commercial companies. They're trading in things, maybe clothes, food items, and everything. This is already the tijara company. You pay, the company itself will, pay zakah, and the shareholders will pay, zakah. Companies which engage both in manufacturing and trade, they combine, that is service and, okay, well, if you are manufacturing something and you are now selling it also, yes. So these two companies which engage only in trade and those which buy goods and sell them without doing anything to change them, such as import and exporting companies, and trade companies. As for companies which engage in both manufacturing and trade, these are companies that combine both activities, such as companies that extract or buy raw materials, subjected to some changes, then trade in them, like petroleum companies, textile companies, and so on. Zakat must be paid on the shares in these companies, in these types of companies. So it goes back to what we're talking about. Now, agricultural companies. Agricultural companies are like manufacturing companies. It's like you are manufacturing the crops and you are selling them. So you are manufacturing and selling these products. So what you first of all have to look at is the products that you're selling. Are they products that in and of themselves, they are subject to zakah, like your wheat, like your barley, like your dates, like your raisins? If these are subject to zakah, then you separate them and pay zakah on them. 5 awsuq, once they reach 5 awsuq, you pay zakah on them. If you water them through irrigation yourself, you pay, you pay 10% on them. And if you use natural, if you use natural means to water them, then you pay 10% on them. If you that is 1/10 on them. If you used your own resources to water them, you pay half of that as zakah. If they are non-zakatable products, then the zakah you pay on them is not the zakah on farm produce. It will be the zakah on trade goods. You are selling yams, you're selling potatoes, you're selling pineapples, you're selling apples. All these are not zakatable according to the most correct opinion of scholars on zakah, on farm products. So you're going to pay zakah on them, not because they are farm products, but because they are urud at-tijara, you're selling them. But if you're going to eat everything, then there's no zakah to be paid. They are going to do sadaqah with everything. There's no zakat to be paid. But if you're going to turn them to trade goods, there is zakat to be paid on them. So these are the categories that those goods that one can trade in are put into. Are you selling products, which could include farm products also? Then there's zakat to be paid. Are you selling services, or then there's no zakat to be paid on the service. If you're having shares, however, in product companies or service companies, if you are selling your shares, then your shares, you've converted them to trade goods and there's zakat on them. If not, then they are personal, your shares are personal, goods. There's no zakat on them. But the dividends are money. You pay zakat, not zakat or trade goods, but zakat or money on them. Is it clear? Is it clear?
نعم جزاكم الله خير.
Okay.
Now, I have a question. For the farmer that is not, the farmer is selling the product also to the traders. Does he have to pay zakat on all his produce, or he has to pay zakat on only wheat and barley, date and raisins?
Okay, barakallahu fikum. Now, if you farm and you're producing, different crops, the first thing you ask yourself is, what crops am I producing? If you're producing the 4 that the scholars agree that all there's ijma that you pay zakat on, barley, wheat, raisins, dates, or you are producing any crop that you hold the position of certain scholars that say that that crop is zakatable, then the zakat you are going to pay on those crops is only the zakat of farm produce, which is either al-ushru, 1/10, or nisful ushru, or half of 1/10. And there's no other zakat to be paid again on that, crop. But if there's a crop that you do not hold the position that it is zakatable under zakat of farm produce, then you ask yourself, what am I going to do with it? If you're going to do anything with it that is not trading, then there's no zakat on it in any shape or form. But if you are going to trade in it, then it is a trade good. You're going to pay zakat on trade goods on it if the conditions are met. If the value is, in addition to other trade goods that you are selling, if you are selling other trade goods, if it reaches the nisab and one howl, is completed, then you pay zakat on it. Both the crops that you have in store at that point in time when one howl arrives and the money that you have acquired from buying and selling those crops during that time. Is it clear?
Yes, jazakumullah khair.
سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد ان لا اله الا انت نستغفرك واتوب اليك. السلام عليكم ورحمه الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله وبركاته.